Balanced Scorecard, where do I start? I've had a relationship with Balanced Scorecard now for about 20 years. I remember I recently did a scorecarding exercise as part of the Catalyst for Growth program in London, and I was actually in the same building that I was in when I first learned this lesson of Balanced Scorecard with a guy called Peter Bebb, who was then of the Renaissance Group and really a guru in scorecarding. And he was absolutely sold on this process, and it came at a time I wanted to understand something about management, and that was, how do management teams make decisions? How do they prioritize? I'd just come off the back of a meeting where I was selling technology, and when I asked the prospect, a big finance house, I said, "How do why do you need this product?" And they just said, "Well, it's on our list." It was literally a block that went into a box somewhere, and they just felt they had to have one. But that was because of the way that psychology worked at the time in the industry. And what I wanted to know is, well, how on earth are these people making priorities and decisions on what they're purchasing? And so when I met up with Peter Bebb, it was quite a cathartic experience, because what he showed me through Balanced Scorecard is a method to reliably articulate a business strategy on a single page. And the way it does that is by asking a few very obvious questions about the business in such a way that anybody can answer the questions. But what it helps to do is to frame the cause and effect relationships that exist between doing things differently, that improve processes, that deliver customer value, that leads to shareholder value. And that's always stuck with me, and I've always trusted it. If you can understand a small number of objectives, and you can understand how they link together, what the relationship is between the things you do differently to what's already happening, that's really powerful. And it means you can always come back to it and review it, adapt it, but you can also measure it. And things don't happen in business unless you can measure the outcomes of them. It's just not taken seriously. So a lot of these things that are pivotal to your strategy, they're quite difficult to measure, but equally, you've got to recognize that you do need to measure them. I think often business leaders struggle with priorities versus habits, and things that are just got to go on in their business. There are so many dimensions to strategy and organizational design, and that tends to be one of them that people struggle with. But another one is also understanding the responsibilities and accountabilities of people, specifically in the leadership team, because that's where it begins. How many people do you need to make decisions? What decisions do you need to make? So a key role for me of the Balanced Scorecard process is to is to shape those portfolios, to understand which people are responsible for which business outcomes. And if you don't set those portfolios up correctly, all that happens is, as departments grow, as the organization matures, you end up in a situation where essentially managers are focused around their department outcomes more than the business outcomes that they need, and that's hugely dangerous. It just doesn't create the business outcomes that you're looking for, because of all these kind of petty squabbles that start to happen between departments. I've even had situations in my life as a bit of a change agent and disruptor, where I've come to the table to see a boss that I was working for at a particular time in a corporate, and I'd be saying, look, this is going to change your customer value. It's going to change your opportunity for growth. Just to get the response, well, why should I do that? It's not on my objectives. It's not on my KPIs. And you're just kind of thinking, well, something's going horribly wrong in a business if the ability to improve your brand, improve your customer value, is being shunned because of the objectives that have been set at the start of the year, with a senior manager that should really be looking holistically across, the success of the business. So I think Balanced Scorecard, what does it do for you? Well, it gives you a steering wheel to manage your business. It gives you clarity over a small number of objectives that are critical to the success of that business. And it also gives you a journey plan to know if we do these things, this small list of things differently, it's going to result in the customer value and the outcomes for shareholders that we're all looking for. And that allows people to buy into it. But I think also it's important to get the safeguarding right, because ultimately, when you're developing a strategy and a scorecard for a company, it's easy for them to assume as a group of people what the customers value, and those assumptions can be hugely dangerous and distracting and derailing. So it's really important to make sure that you're understanding what the customers want. But equally, if you want people in your organization to adopt this strategy, you've also got to get them to buy into it. And the way to do that is to include them in the formation of that strategy. Ask them the question, give them the opportunity themselves to contribute their thoughts on the things that matter most to customers and what internal processes are important. These sorts of things people do have perspectives on from where they are in the organization, how they're placed, their past experiences. And they want to bring all of that to work, and they want to feel part of an organization that's contributing to the planet, to society, to community, and that they can contribute to that organization. So I want to point to the obvious outcomes. If you're doing a Catalyst for Growth program or a Catalyst for Change program with us, what you're going to see in Balanced Scorecard is it's the starting point of everything. It's the navigation that sets out the stall of what everybody's trying to do that everybody can agree with. And this inclusion, this gaining consensus is pivotal. Because it means that everybody's on the same page and it's all been agreed. Everybody's had the opportunity to participate in the formation of this strategy. It's one strategy, it's not a dozen strategies. And it means that all of the activities of the organization should fall out of that. And there's a massive economy to this as well, because if you are doing that, if you have only actions that you're doing that relate to those objectives, there's an obvious question that says, if I'm doing something that isn't in that framework, why on earth am I doing it? And more to the point, why aren't I outsourcing it if it's something that's non-core to my business? And over the last 20 years, I've run these scorecarding exercises, and we've come up with tens, if not hundreds, if not thousands of actions that organizations are doing as part of their departmental activities that are completely non-core to the success of their business and the outcomes that they've outlined. And you've got to ask the question, why on earth are we doing all this stuff? Why are we wasting so much money on all of these distractions? And often in a bigger organization, you're going to find organizations are replicating those actions. You've got a project going on in the tech department that's actually also happening in HR or learning and development, because they just see it in a slightly different tangential way. So getting this stuff sorted out saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of costs, it gets more inclusion, it gets more energy in the business. It sets out the stall of what it is you've got to do to be successful. And then you can set out your plan as to how you're going to achieve that. Now, the three areas that we look at Tomlin & Co. are change and behavior. How do you get the experience for customers and your stakeholders that is important? How do you get that behavior change right? I know Otto Scharmer, in his book, which is called Theory U, he talks about how organizations, he was a farmer, and he used to look out at a field and see when the corn's growing, it's not just the corn that you should be looking at, but the health of the soil. And in organizations, the health of the soil is everything. I know that from the amount of organizations I've consulted for and with. And when you realize that, you start to look at these challenges with a different lens. You're kind of thinking about, what do we have to do? But again, why are we doing it? Let's step back. And I think, that points to this whole concept of mindfulness and thinking about what you're doing before you're doing it. I always think, so I used to play a lot of chess when I was a kid. When you're looking at a chessboard, you've got somebody making a move, but then you've got that psychology that's saying, but why are they making that move? But then you can go a step further back than that and actually ask the question, well, yeah, why are, what's their mindset in order to make that move? What sort of person are they? And I think if you're doing these activities for organizations, you've got to take those steps back as you're building your strategy.